Today's episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity.
Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I'm a mom of 3, a yoga teacher, and a trainer and consultant who works for yoga teachers. This podcast was created for you so that you can connect to information and inspiration every single week and feel supported as you navigate these sometimes very tricky jungles of being a yoga teacher and also an entrepreneur. One thing I've learned in all my years as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, is that you never stop learning. There are so many strategies out there for running a successful business and so many different approaches. And honestly, there's always something new that we could learn and implement in our own business that could really make a difference. And this is why I've invited another expert to talk to us about email marketing today, and specifically email marketing strategy for yoga teachers. We talked about email marketing with Tarzan K in episode 139. I did a consultation call with Kristen Boyle in episode 72 about email and content marketing. And way back in episode 9, I talked about how to create and grow your yoga student email list. In today's episode, we get to hear from another expert, Jessica Stansberry, about how we can create our own email marketing strategy. I first reached out to Jessica when I read an article that she did comparing a few different email platforms. And this was the main reason for our interview today, but we got into so many other topics, like how to create a nurturing sequence, how often to email our yoga students, how to set up our emails so that our students open them, how to trim our list. There were so many things, and I was jotting down notes as we were going, and I'm still implementing a couple of things that I learned from Jessica. So before we dive in, remember at the very end of the episode, I usually ask you what is the one thing that you will be doing this week, or what's your key takeaway. Do not feel like you have to do everything with your email today in this moment. Email marketing is powerful. I know this in my own business. I see it the way I connect with other businesses. I really tend to purchase something when it's through an email. And most of my sales are through email. And this is why I'm so excited that we're going to talk all about email today with Jessica, because she breaks it down in a way that's really easy to approach and implement. If you're looking for links, all of our show notes are ready for you at theconnectedyogateacher.com/176. And I'll also link back to that original article that Jessica wrote that caught my eye, where she compares MailChimp, MailerLite, ConvertKit, I think are the 3 email platforms. And if you have questions beyond today's episode, use our Facebook group to ask those questions. Go to theconnectedyogateacher.com and look right on the homepage there. There's a join button. Before I introduce you to Jessica today, I have a couple of shout outs. So the very first one is to our sponsor, Schedulicity. Team Schedulicity has been doing a lot to help yoga teachers and other small business owners right now. I was really honored to be part of a town hall that they recently did all about reopening. So I'll make sure to link to that in the show notes. If you'd like to watch the full video, I'm answering all kinds of questions about props, policies, insurance, masks, teaching inside, teaching outside, teaching online. There were a lot of amazing questions. Let's also hear our hot tip of the week from the team over at Schedulicity.
Hello, Connected Yoga Teachers. This is Ren with the Schedulicity Hot Tip of the Week. Once you have an email and content strategy, Schedulicity makes it a breeze to commit and follow through. The client communications tool allows you to send email messages to your clients and use their Schedulicity booking history to filter them into groups. It's never been easier to target your emails and market directly to the people who are most interested in your content. Keep that personal touch without sacrificing your personal time.
Thank you so much, Team Schedulicity. Also, I just want to note that if you haven't already looked into the Schedulicity Cares grant, make sure you do that. So one person who attends the town hall each and every week, if you're listening to this live, this is still happening. One person attending live can win a $500 business grant, And also they're giving away, I think they said 3 grants per week on top of this. So look for the hashtag Schedulicity Cares. Go to their website, schedulicity.com. I'll make sure that we also link to them in our show notes. Also, a shout out of thank you to Catherine from Belgium. I'm so excited that you are listening all the way over in Belgium. Catherine said, I recently discovered this podcast, and since then I've been listening to it every day. I love how it covers such a variety of topics that are interesting and useful for yoga teachers. Shannon does a fantastic job in hosting and choosing the topics and guests. I feel it's really nourishing me in my very new career in teaching yoga. Thanks a lot for your greatly appreciated work, Shannon. Catherine. Thank you so much, Catherine, for taking the time to leave a review. If you're wondering how you can also do the same, you can do that from our show notes page. Go to theconnectedyogateacher.com/176. Also, Catherine, I am so curious. I was just thinking today, what is it like to be in a 200-hour or to be graduating from a 200-hour and have a whole new level of learning in front of you? Maybe some of you are taking a 200-hour online, and maybe you're teaching online in that. I'm so curious to hear if someone is listening and then thinking, I have something to tell you about what it's like to be a new teacher right now, or what it's like to run a teacher training right now with everything pandemic life and online yoga. There is a button that you can press on our homepage and you can leave me a voicemail. So let me know if you'd like to chat further. I'm just really curious to hear from some new yoga teachers. Alrighty, let's dive in and meet Jessica Stansberry. She is the founder and CEO of Hey Jessica, LLC, and is a personal and business development strategist dedicated to helping women grow online businesses. She also hosts a weekly podcast called Grit and an extremely popular YouTube channel with over 79,000 subscribers. Through free content on her blog, online courses that teach hashtag all the things about starting and running a business, Jessica helps women turn their dreams into dollar bills. That's her quote. I am so excited that she's here on the podcast today to share her expertise with us, dear connected yoga teachers. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Jessica. It's great to have you here today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
I am super excited that we get to chat about email. A lot of our connected yoga teachers were saying that they very quickly had to leave their studios and then all of a sudden couldn't reach their students. So this is one thing that our yoga teachers are dealing with. Another thing is that we really know that email is still a thing. Like sometimes people think, is that really like maybe it's just all about social. So why don't you tell us before we dive in, what is the work that you do and who do you do it for?
Sure. So I help passionate women build businesses that support the life that they want. So I do that by creating online courses, creating a lot of free content. I have a podcast, a YouTube channel, and I just basically put out advice into the world to allow them to be able to take the steps to build the business so that their business sustains the life they want. And that's really important to me because I think a lot of times people get in business to have this like freedom, and then they end up working way more than they ever did before, and they don't have the freedom, and it's like a whole thing. So it's really important to for me to give two sides of the equation, the business building, kick butt hustle side, and then the side where we're like, whoa, calm down. You should see your children sometime, so that's kind of my mission.
So with, in terms of email, I can't even remember what I saw come out from you where you were starting to compare, like, which email platform should I use? Mm-hmm. First of all, do you want to highlight kind of the importance of email?
Of course. So I do think a lot of times, especially people who never had email lists to begin with, don't see They do. They see that social is more important than email. And y'all, if you take nothing else from this conversation, you should know this one thing, and that is that you don't own your Instagram followers. You don't own your Facebook followers. You don't own your podcast listeners or the people who follow you on TikTok. You don't own those people. And at any given point, if you try and get in touch with them, the algorithms only allow you to get in touch with a very small percentage based on what they think it should get in touch with. Like, it's not like you can just post and your 2,000 fans on Facebook will see it. Facebook's going to be like, I think 20 people might like this, So you don't own it and you don't have any control over it. You also don't own your website traffic. You don't own anything in this online space. The only thing you actually own is your email list. So you can print it out and carry it around with you if you want to. If you're like, hey, I got Jill at gmail.com today, I'm going to print her out and take her with me. You can, because it is legal and they have opted into that type of relationship. So not only that, but your email list are the dedicated people to your brand. So it's really easy for someone to hit like or follow, right? Like, it's super easy. And then for them to forget why they found you or why they liked you or why they followed you. But if you're emailing and they're on your email list, that took a lot more effort for them to get there. They had to put in their email address. They had to see that you were worthy of them giving you their email address that they're protective of because they already get too many emails, right? And then they had to know who you were at a pretty high level before they were ready to do that. And with email, you're getting in touch with those people who are all in already. And so conversion rates from email are higher, sales rates from emails are higher. And it's also the place where people go to kind of get to know us better. And so email as a whole is not dead, and it will never be dead. I think it's dead in the way that people used to use it. So people used to send those branded, which my Chamber of Commerce still does this. So, here we are. But those Old Navy sends you a newsletter and it's a picture and a, this and what's happening at the store and 20% off and all these pictures. That's what small businesses used to do. And nobody gives a flying fart about that anymore. They want actual information and they want to know you as a person. And so email is different than it used to be, but it's very much so still one of the top levels that you should work on to grow your business and to grow your sales.
Right. And so something you said there, I really want to highlight. You said people trust us and they're already getting too many emails. That's one thing that I hear from yoga teachers. Oh gosh, I don't want to email people every week because they'll get tired of hearing from me. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah. If they got tired of hearing from you and they unsubscribed, they weren't going to buy from you anyway. It doesn't really matter, right? It's fine. They weren't going to buy from you anyway. And that's kind of how I take, if somebody unfollows me on Instagram or unfollows me on Facebook, which I never know who those people are, but same thing on email. I mean, I send out an email and get 100 unsubscribes every single time. But I have a fairly large email list. So that's, in proportion, it's not that bad, but I get 100 people who are like, no, I don't like you anymore. But at the same time, they wouldn't have bought from me anyway because they didn't like hearing what I had to say. So I would much rather them dip out and self-qualify to say, you know what, this isn't for me anymore, than to stay there and for me to continue to pay for them, because at a certain point you pay for your email list subscribers and them not actually want what I have to say, right? So it is it can feel intrusive, but if they don't like it, they're going to unsubscribe and that's fine. And also you didn't want them there anyway.
Exactly. Oh, that's such a good point. I used to watch, when I had a really small list, I would take those unsubscribes so personally, and I don't even look at them at all now. I don't.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm like, oh gosh, I need to pare my list down because now I've just jumped to the next price thing. And sometimes I think, oh, I need more people off my list, which is a which is a weird switch. Yeah.
Once a quarter or once every 6 months, it kind of just depends on when I get time to do it. I scrub my list, which basically I take everybody who hasn't opened an email, clicked an email, like any kind of activity, and I send them an email. If they haven't done that in 90 days, I send them an email and I'm like, hey, sometimes I know things go, under the radar, or like those, my system telling me you haven't clicked isn't always right. So like you very well may actually have been engaged. And if you are, please click this button. And that way I know, like, it then flags them as like, never mind, they're not cold subscribers. And then I delete everybody who doesn't reply or click. And I mean, I'm deleting usually between like 2,000 and 3,000 people every time. And that used to, I mean, like, who in the world deletes 3,000 people off their email list? But I don't want to pay for them if they're not going to benefit my business and if they don't care about what I have to say. And there's always going to be people who don't care,
Right. Yeah, that's such a good point. I should put this on my calendar. I don't have that at all right now. It would be a good time to do it.
Yeah, I do it every quarter-ish. And I usually put it on my calendar around the same time that we talk about like taxes and that kind of thing, so that I remember it. But sometimes I'm like, I'm too busy. I'm pushing it off another quarter. So it just kind of depends. But yeah, it's great. And it's funny because, if I would have left everybody on my list at the list side, like, oh my gosh, I would have had this massive list. But like, what does that matter?
Right.
If like half of them weren't even engaging with me, all it matters is that I can brag and be like, oh, I had this huge list and I don't care,
Right. So it sounds like you're pretty good at building your email list. Is there anything that you would tell our yoga teachers so we're recording this when we're right in the midst of still the COVID-19 pandemic. Is there anything that you would tell them in terms of, all right, you maybe have a really small list or non-existent list. Here's how to build it up.
Yeah. So the biggest thing would be nobody wants to sign up for a newsletter just to sign up for a newsletter. Like, that is not why people want to get on an email list. They want to get on your email list because you gave them some piece of value for free to get there. So hosting webinars or online classes, like especially yoga teachers, like, hey, go ahead and sign up for this Zoom yoga session we're going to do. But to sign up, you have to give me your email address. And then there you go. There's you 20 more people on your email list. So things like that will build it really well, but also giving resources. So, here's a PDF of 20 yoga stretches you can do every day during the quarantine to whatever, right? Like relieve stress or whatever. And in order to get that, they have to give you their email address. So there's a lot of different ways to grow it. And it really depends on if you're, what type of business you have. Like, are you offering those online services? Do you need it to stay like hyper local? Whatever. But I mean, giving people free value in exchange for their email address is always the best way to grow it.
Right. This is so good. And to find something where people are like, oh yeah, for sure, I'll give you my email for that. Mm-hmm. This is good.
Exactly.
And so then a lot of our yoga teachers, when they start out as small business owners, they're wanting an email service that is free. I don't know if you have one that you love that is free. And then eventually I usually see people start to move to a paid one. First of all, I'd love to know your thought there. Do you suggest just starting with the paid one so you don't have all of that conversion, or do you recommend starting with the free one?
Yeah, so I have moved my email list more than I've moved houses at this point. And it's always a pain in the butt to move your email list. So I think it's always good to start with the system you want to stay with. And obviously, sometimes we don't know that, right? Like, we don't know that when we get into it, it's not going to have this feature that we wanted, and this one over here has that. So there's always going to be like, a little bit of give and take. But most systems have a free version up until a certain amount, and then you start paying. And that's what I would say to start with more than anything is the free version of the system you would pay for once you get to that level. And my favorite one is ConvertKit. So I love ConvertKit. It's a great email marketing system, and it has really good integrations with other things. So if you're doing like webinars or things like that, it really does well. And they didn't used to have a free version. It used to be $29 just for everybody up until I think maybe like 2,000 subscribers. Now I believe it's free until 1,000 subscribers. It's either 1,000 or 500. So you can have it completely for free and you get all the features of it until you hit that subscriber numbers.
Connected Yoga teachers, I wanted to pop in here and just clarify in case you were wondering, how many subscribers can I have for free in ConvertKit? It's 1,000, and this is recording in July of 2020, so it might change depending on when you're listening to this. I use ActiveCampaign, and I really like that company, but I tell yoga teachers to use ConvertKit when they're first starting out. So I really like that you can build an email list for free in ConvertKit. I really like the company, and I've heard great things about their customer service. All right, let's get back to the interview with Jessica.
I would suggest starting there just because it's a really great system. Now, it is not a visual builder like something like MailChimp, so it's not going to allow you to send those traditional newsletters where there's pictures on the side and there's graphics in the middle and, whatever, but that's a good thing. So just quick little blurb about that one. The reason that's a good thing, one, most email systems, so like Outlook, Gmail, Mac Mail, like whatever your people are getting their mail on, most of them filter those types of newsletters into spam automatically or into promotions. So that's why you're going to, like, I use Gmail. And if you look at the top of Gmail, it has like primary inbox, promotions, social media, and it automatically filters things. So, anytime I get like a retweet on Twitter, which I don't even know my password to Twitter, but I get notifications for it. Whatever. But so anytime that goes in like the social tab, right? And anytime I get a newsletter from Old Navy, it goes in the promotions tab. And I have never told my inbox to do that. And so you want to try and get around that because you want to land in their actual inbox. I don't know the last time I opened my promotions tab on Gmail, So you want to land in their inbox. And to do that, you need to be writing emails like you're writing an email to a friend. So just like you wrote an email, to me, giving me details about this call, right? Like it needs to look very similar to that when you write an email to your email list, not like flashy and fancy and pictures everywhere. Because one, then it'll go to the inbox, but two, the people will actually read it and feel like they're getting to know you, which is a massive piece of the puzzle. So I wouldn't use something that's more visual based anyway, but if you're coming from something like that, ConvertKit may take a little bit of getting used to because it is very much so word based. I mean, obviously you can put pictures in it, but it's very similar to if you opened up Gmail and started writing an email to a friend and you wanted to put a picture in the middle. It's kind of like that.
Right. You're making me think. So I use ActiveCampaign, and I looked at ConvertKit and ActiveCampaign and finally just went with ActiveCampaign because a friend said she uses it.
I like ActiveCampaign. I've been on ActiveCampaign before, and the only reason I left was because I really like the people behind the company of ConvertKit. So I basically am a email marketing service whore at this point. So I started on MailChimp eons ago, and then very quickly moved to like Aweber, which is old and many people don't use it anymore. But I went to Aweber, and then I went from Aweber to ConvertKit. Then somewhere along the line, ConvertKit didn't have a couple of the features that I saw some of my friends having on things like ActiveCampaign. And so I was like, I've got to switch. Like I need those features. And I switched to one before ActiveCampaign that's like a big dog, like the Entreports and things like that. Oh, that was awful. And I'm techie, and it was still bad. And then I switched to ActiveCampaign, and right when I switched to ActiveCampaign, ConvertKit got all the features I wanted.
Oh my goodness.
So I stayed on ActiveCampaign for, 6 months, 8 months, because I just did not want to move it again. But then I was speaking at ConvertKit's conference, and like, they're just really good people and really good they're one of my biggest affiliate partners. And so I'm like, I really should go back to them because I really like the company. And now they have all the features I need. So I switched back. So ActiveCampaign's fine. That was really the only reason I switched. So yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on MailerLite? Because I think I saw you wrote an article about that as well.
Yeah, so MailerLite's a really great option, especially if you need, it's very similar to ConvertKit. And before ConvertKit started their free version, I would tell people start on MailerLite because it's free and it has a lot of the same features. And then once you're ready, if you're ready, move over to ConvertKit or something else. But now that ConvertKit has its free level, I would probably just do that because they're very similar. I mean, like almost identical, and ConvertKit just has a few more features. So MailerLite's good though. So if you're already on MailerLite, I wouldn't like move off of it tomorrow or anything, but just be thinking about which one you'd want to pay for in the future.
Right. Oh, this is really good to know. And I know that you had said just start on that. Like that's worth, not switching is worth so much. I still have just a couple forms to switch over from MailChimp, and I am dreading doing it, which is, it's really easy to switch it over, but it's just like you have to think of every form, every place where people sign up for something.
Totally. Yeah. Yes. I get emails every day from people who are like, this link is broken that you talked about in a YouTube video 3 years ago.
Right.
Like, yeah, it is. I ain't fixing it. So get on my email somehow, some other way, because at one point I had, when I first started on YouTube, which was about, I don't know, right at 3 years ago, consistently being on YouTube. I had an opt-in or a freebie for like every video that went live. So that was a lot of videos and a lot of opt-ins. And so eventually we consolidated and we fixed everything we could think of, but there's still some floating around that aren't fixed. And I just do not care. Like whatever, you'll figure it out. I just don't care right now.
That makes me feel better. You can't catch every one of those links.
No, not at all.
Is there anything that you think people aren't talking about enough with regards to email? Is there any topic where you're like, this isn't being covered?
Yeah. So I think people miss the boat on what email is for, or what like your email list is for. It's not always for selling, and it shouldn't always be for self-promotion. I would say you're looking at like 80-20, where the 20 is selling and self-promotion and the 80 is providing helpful resources to the people on the list. So you want to give them a helpful resource to get on the list, right? But then once they're on there, you don't want to just sell to them constantly, because you're not building a relationship at that point, and a relationship is what they need to buy from you. So I think so many people flip that, and they're, building a relationship 20% of the time, if that, and selling 80. And that is not going to get you the results that you need from your email list. So at any given time, if you launch something, so let's say when the yoga studios open back up, you do like a big like open house and they can pay $10 to come to the class or whatever, right? At any given time, you should be able to convert somewhere between 1% and 3% of your email list to sales for every launch. And that's for lists that are growing constantly. So if you've got the same 100 people, that's going to go down every time because they've already purchased from you. But ideally, that's the case. And if you are just selling all the time, that is going to be massively lower because people are dipping out at a quicker rate that may have bought from you if you would have taken the time to like get to know them. So I call this like, it's a comparison to dating, right? Like you wouldn't just like walk up to somebody and be like, hey, let's go get married and have babies. I mean, maybe if you were like really drunk, but you wouldn't be serious,
Right.
So that's exactly what your marketing looks like when you're just like, oh, you just met me. Here's a link to go buy from my store. Or here's a link to go do this thing, or here's this whatever to buy from me. And that is not okay. Like people feel very like smothered by that So you for sure want to take it a little slower, date them for a while before you're like, hey, I should meet the parents. Hey, I'm going to put a ring on it, and that's it. I think that's the part that people miss is that, and that's not just with email, that's with social media too. That's the part that people miss is like, it shouldn't just be a constant pitch fest. It shouldn't be this constant place for you to sell. It is literally a place for you to nurture your people. So when you're ready to sell, they're there and they're ready.
Okay. I have another question because you talked about the images and having them in there. Like I like to put an image. So let's say a podcast episode goes out. I put an image of the cover art because I think, well, it really showcases the guest and the title. Is that a bad thing to do? Should I try? No.
No. That's fine. As long as you're not like loading it with images, it is fine. So most of my emails have 1 to 2 images in them as well. And so it's more when the whole email is image based. So if you think back to MailChimp and the way it's built, like you're literally dragging and dropping and it's all like images and like little blurbs of text, right? There's some like nerdy things we could talk about there. But basically when you build a newsletter like that, the back end of it is so crowded and like jumbled up. So the email service they for sure think it's spam because if all they're reading is the code that comes in from that email. So when you do a service like ActiveCampaign or ConvertKit, either one does this great. It doesn't look like that on the back end to the email provider. So it just looks like words. And then it also has like image qualifications in it. Now, if you loaded it full of images, it would look like that. So you have to be really careful, but that's kind of why you don't want to do that. But I say 1 to 2 images per email is totally fine.
Right. And then the other thing I see yoga teachers doing is they'll create all kinds of content and maybe send out once a month emails. So you get this like book of an email. Yeah. It's so long. And I'm always saying to them, come on, split it up into 4 and send one out a week. And they hesitate. They're like, oh, wait, but I don't want to overwhelm my people. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I say once a week too. I think once a week emails are always good. It keeps you top of mind for your people. So a month is a really long time. Imagine if you were dating, right? Like a month is a really long time not to see your dating person. What is that called? Your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whatever. A month's a really long time. So like at least keeps the relationship spicy, right? Like you got to see them every once in a while. So I say like once a week is kind of where I would stay too. But remember that whole, like, don't be selling and all of those rule as well, because once a week is a lot if you're constantly pushing, and not just giving. So, Gary Vee has a book called Jab, 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 Right Hook.
Yes.
And it's amazing, especially if you love Gary Vee, because, he's fun. But it's Jab, 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 Right Hook. And the whole point of this book is that you give, get. And so you constantly have to be giving to expect someone to give back to you. So if you are wanting them to become a customer or a client or a student or whatever you call them, right? Then you have to be giving to them constantly before you're like, wait, I need something from you. So if you're sending out weekly emails and they're all just like, look at me, get this thing, get this offer, do this thing, then once a week's awful, but they're also not going to respond once a month either. So you want to be really careful there, and you want to make sure it's like a give, get relationship.
Right. And I love how you put this 80-20 to it. So we could be giving 80% of the time. And the other thing our yoga teachers struggle to do sometimes is that ask. Like they might just send out a newsletter every single week and never ask to buy. Like that's the other thing I will see.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's pretty normal, pretty common. And I think there's people on both sides of the spectrum, which is really funny, and very few people in the middle. So there's the people who are terrified to sell or to ask. And then there's the people who ask way too much and are terrified to do the other part. So I think you just have to like work it like a muscle. And so I would just put it on your calendar. I mean, it's probably more 75-25 at this point, but I would put it on your calendar to do the first 3 weeks of the month are all giving emails, and the last one is an asking email. And that way the ratio kind of works out. Unless there's a 5-week month, and then it is 80-20. So, but basically you want to like work that muscle, because you definitely need to be asking, even if the ask is not monetary. So you want to get them used to saying yes to you and doing things that you ask them to do, because if you don't, they're not going to say yes when there's money involved. So it might be like, come watch this YouTube video, come join me for this free class, come do this thing. But that way they're used to it, so that when they are asked to give their money, their dollars, then they're like, oh, sure, I can do that. So I would put it on your calendar and just say like, okay, well, this week's email has to ask them to do something.
Right. Okay, so now I have a really technical question.
Yes, I like techie questions.
The question is, when someone joins your list, say I join your list, do you have a nurture sequence so that it's laid out that I wouldn't hit that like last email of the month where you're selling to me? Or is that just kind of luck of the draw? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I do know what you mean. So my nurture sequence doesn't sell to them at all. So my particular nurture sequence is just them getting to know me. So they get 3 or 4 emails over the course of 2 weeks. So they're actually more than once a week at that point. So they get the initial email that's like, here's your free thing that you just signed up for, right? And then I tell them in that email, hey, you're going to get a couple more emails from me. I want to get to know you. And then they get, I think it's 4 emails from me that really let us get to know each other. And the only thing I ask them to do is come follow me on Instagram so that they can DM back and forth with me and we can have a conversation about what was in that email. So one of the pieces of my nurture sequence is a big, long story email about how I got treated in corporate and how I ended up quitting my corporate job, because it's like this big, sad, emotional story. And I asked them like, hey, if you've ever had something like this happen, I would love for you to come over to Instagram and let me know and like tell me about it, because I don't want this to just be one-sided conversation. And a lot of them do. And then they come over. That's growing my Instagram, but also I'm actually answering them on DM. So it's growing the relationship like really, really quickly. And then once they're through that nurture sequence, I might send out an email that week asking them to buy something, but they could already be ready to do that. Or they're just back on my normal schedule, and it might be 2 months for them before they get asked to buy something because of when they came in, but that's okay.
Right. Oh, this is a really good thing to think about.
Good.
So where should people go to follow you if they're really interested to learn more from you?
Yeah. So my 2 biggest platforms that I'm always on and always giving good information on are my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Jessica Stansberry, and also Instagram, same thing. It's just at Jessica Stansberry. And then I have a podcast as well, since we're on a podcast. It is called Grit, Grit, and it's a solid mix of business strategy and personal development strategy. So if you're a podcast listener, which I imagine you would be, considering you're listening to this, that's always a good next transition.
Yeah, I was really excited when I saw some of your topics that you recently did. I was like, I need to get these in my podcast playlist. So.
Good.
Thank you so much for your time today. It has been really fun to hang out, and I hope that everyone in your family, in your community where you live, stays well during this time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. You too.
All right, take care. Okay, Connected Yoga teachers, I want to hear from you. How was that? What were your key takeaways? And like I said, there was a lot of information there. So what's one thing that you learned today that you want to bring into your own business and your own way of doing email with your yoga students? I would love to hear from you in the show notes. If you go to theconnectedyogateacher.com/176, you can leave a comment below. Tell me, what is that one thing that you're going to do? We can be each other's accountability buddies in there, or jump into our Facebook group and share in there what you are going to do with your email or what your questions are. Before I sign off here today, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to today's episode and to connect with some new information that might really serve your community in getting yoga out there a little bit more through email. I also want to thank our team, Suzanne, Crunch, Nick, and Sinead, for making today's podcast episode possible and also for doing so many other things behind the scenes. Alrighty, connected yoga teachers, you know what I'm going to ask if you've been listening for a while. I want to know, what will you be doing this week to stay connected? Maybe to yourself, maybe to your yoga practice, or maybe to your community, so that you can share the yoga that lights you up.